The Pittsburgh Steelers are rumored to be involved in just a massive trade. And you guys know they've shown interest in a potential trade for Brandon Ayuk. After a trade request to the San Francisco 49ers, after a really drawn out contract impasse, he might be available. And whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's Justin Fields, one of the two are going to emerge as the team's new starter at quarterback. Pittsburgh could really use a top flight receiver opposite big play guy George Pickens, right? And there's also a potential trend developing as the league moves more and more towards favoring aerial attacks. That's having a big three. Chicago's done it. The Texans have a formidable trio. Could Pittsburgh be next? Is it becoming a new thing in the NFL? And there's really a few things that influence this. Always, it's a cap concern, right? The development of a new wideout, former national champion with the Michigan Wolverines, Roman Wilson, his development is key. And finally, what would the cost be to get him? And what's up? This is Sports Talk Steelers. I'm your host, Sean. I'm primarily a Bears fan. I have a Bears channel, but when the Bears are out of it, which they often are, I roll with the Steelers and I follow them, and they've been a really favorite team of mine. So starting something new, get in on the ground floor. If you love the content, like and subscribe. So let's start with this. Let's kind of start with going over the cap. And according to Over the Cap, the Steelers, they're spending only $14 million in receiver salaries this year. That's a third in the NFL. The really encouraging thing about this is that they aren't loaded up with huge receiver salaries that are ready to balloon up and make this position group disproportionately paid as part of the salary cap. And the thing is, though, Pickens, he's going to have to be paid soon. He's extension eligible for the first time next offseason. He's been a bit difficult at times, but if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, you kind of had the attitude of, yeah, he's difficult. Yeah, he's kind of a jerk sometimes, but he's our jerk, right? And we love him. So I totally get that. Also, I'm going to this story here on Steelers Depot. This is kind of where I'm pulling some of these stats from. So if you get a chance, just check out this whole story. So he's going to have to be signed soon, but he's had 1,941 yards on 115 catches over these last 2 years, and that's with ridiculously bad quarterback situations. And Pickens, he's going to have to be paid soon, probably next year. We've also got the offloading of Deontay Johnson to the Panthers. That helps here too for future salary cap flexibility. And Pittsburgh, they're sitting here with about $16 million in cap space. So with some finagling, right, the team can afford to sign Ayuk to the deal he wants. In the meantime, they have the ability to immediately take on his $14 million salary. And that's a requirement. When you trade for a player, you have to be able to take on his salary. Technically, that has to be carried for 24 hours after you acquire the player. But in reality, anyone, including the Steelers, if they add Ayuk, they're going to have to give him an immediate extension. So going back to this story on SteelersDepot.com, check it out for yourself. Once again, former GM Frank Whaley, he thinks the Steelers should go get this done due to the need positionally and the fact that they're sitting at the sixth highest in cap space next year. I mean, the cash is there. And I can even go back to that if that's helpful. Let's go back to, here we go. Let's hear from former GM Whaley. I mean, now you've got one legitimate guy that keeps a D coordinator up at night, and then you have a number 2 in Pickens and a number 2A in Freiermuth. Now you have 3 receiving options with 2 running back options and a heavy offense that can do play action. I think it's a good 1 to 2 games added on to the Steelers win total. And there's been some shuffling at QB, as you know, no longer having to deal with Pickett, a new offensive coordinator, new scheme. It looks like Wilson is the starter to begin the year. I mean, there's a lot. Fields might make a run in camp. That wouldn't be out of the question, but these stats here, they do not lie. Pittsburgh averaged just 18 points per game last year, had one of the worst passing offenses in the entire league. They averaged only 186 yards per game. And there's absolutely no doubt that with Ayuk, the Steelers, they'd have a chance to create balance on offense, pairing two talented receivers with an already strong running game. I mean, what is not to like about that? Pair it with the running game, and I'd argue that Wilson, he's going to develop into that strong number 3 to create a trio. I mean, they can't fully replace the route running and separation that came with Deontay Johnson, but Wilson, he's got some wiggle, man. And right now, though his role seems pretty solid as the team's number 2, the team really needs Wilson to improve and to be ready to contribute on day 1 without making a move, because they just have no solid depth at the position. And the benefit that the team has, Wilson can play inside or outside. He did it at Michigan. He spent 91% of his time in the slot as a junior in 22 and 65.5% of his time in the slot last season, and that's per PFF. And I would say while Wilson is just lining up where they tell him, right, a more defined role that should reveal itself in camp that's starting very soon. And so Wilson, he's firmly the Steelers' number 2 receiver behind George Pickens. And while starting role, it's not just given due to the lack of competition. Right now, it's pretty much his by default, and this is all barring a trade with the 49ers. One thing I'd like to look at, though, if this trade happens, what does the receiver group look like? Ayuk, he plays the X role. Pickens, he stays at the Z, plays a little slot. Then you've got some options, right? But I really like Wilson. Guys like Jefferson, Freiermuth, to a lesser extent. Pretty interesting. Calvin Austin III, he had some pop last year as well. So there is some receiver talent, but there's not really that solid number 2 that's going to be necessary to balance this offense. And I think they would be well served to go get Ayuk, and that it helped them compete immediately, one of the NFL's best divisions, right, against these opposing secondaries that are pretty daunting in this division. Where we stand right now, San Fran, they've actually given zero indication that they're ready to bend to the trade request from Ayuk, but the Steelers, they seem to be the ideal dance partner here, and I think they can definitely get something done. So if we go to the last thing, what's the cost, right? I mean, this is all conjecture on this, but Kyle Madison at Steelers Wire, he had an interesting suggestion, and his offer to the Niners would include a 2025 second-round pick, plus, hold your breath, edge Alex Highsmith. Instead of giving another draft choice or a first rounder, I agree that a first rounder is probably not a good move. Plus, because you have to pay Ayuk on top of it, and it's just not a good move. So, but let's hear him out. It's tough to find a deal that works with the Steelers. Highsmith is probably the best player they have that the 49ers would want and potentially get. It's a steep ask, but San Fran, they would desire a player who could help them this year. Highsmith would immediately become their second best edge rusher. And from a Steelers standpoint, a trade like this, that'd be contingent on just how confident the Steelers are with second-year edge defender Nick Herbig, right? Fans, they might look at this as completely unrealistic, but when you consider the Steelers traded away wide receiver Deontay Johnson for a starting cornerback, absolutely no backup plan, you kind of understand that anything's possible with this front office. And I agree, it's an incredibly steep price. Highsmith just had his contract restructured, though, and this is very interesting as well. Highsmith had his contract restructured in the first year of the 4-year, $68 million extension that he signed just last offseason, and that was to save the team $7.2 million in cap space this year. So in my eyes, that's the biggest indication why it might be a possibility, because many times a move like this, it signals a team exploring a trade, a desire to add a veteran salary. Talks with the 49ers, I'm sure they're still resuming. I'm sure they're still happening, but let's just keep tabs on this to see what develops. And you guys, as we're getting this off the ground, I really appreciate you guys watching. This has been a fun off season. It's going to be even more fun camp, and I'm looking forward to walking through this with you. Take care.